Week 15, you've done it. You're in the playoffs. Must win. Got to beat your buddy, your idiot coworker. You know what to do. It's winning time. Time to lock in. I am your host, Shaun Moran. This is the Regression to the Mean podcast. On today's episode, we have ranked the top 50 wide receivers for Week 15. Solo pod today. No Keegan and Aiden. We miss you, Keegan and Aiden, but the show goes on. If you are new to our ranking show, first off, welcome. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Seriously, we're putting out some of the best content out right now in the fantasy space. Like, comment, subscribe. You know the drill. Secondly, I have ranked the top 50 options at wide receiver, and I've broken them into around 7 or 8 tiers for Week 15. I'm going to take you through each tier, share a couple notes on each guys. Each tier here is time-stamped, and the rankings are in the description of this video below. So if you are seeing this screen share and you want to take a look at these rankings more in-depth and you want to see some of the data I have, go ahead, go in the description of this video, click on it. It's 100% free. You do not have to pay for it. And 2, if you just want a specific tier, if you want to learn about tier 2 or tier 3, or you just want to know, should I start Chris Olave or should I start Davante Adams or things along like those lines, you could jump into each tier that those players are in. So if you jump in the description of this video, each tier is timestamped. Find the player you want to hear me talk about, jump to the timestamp there. We want to make these episodes as relevant and actionable for you as possible. Also, before we dive into the episode, we just want to make a quick shout out here to our friends over at Chalkboard Fantasy Sports. We have just partnered with them, and we think they're one of the most exciting brands in the fantasy and gambling space. And we think their Chalkboard picks game is awesome. You can win up to 100x your money by simply choosing more or less on the projected stat lines of your favorite NFL players. Think similarly to like Prize Picks, Underdogs, Pick'em Lobby. But what makes Chalkboard unique is the fact that you can take alternate lines. So, for example, this Thursday night, we've got the Chargers and we have got the Raiders. No Keenan Allen, no Justin Herbert. This makes me think that a backup quarterback in Easton Stick might have trouble against someone like Max Crosby and might be continuously checking the ball down to Austin Eckler. You hop on Chalkboard right now. You can take a look at Austin Eckler's projection, which is 4.5 receptions. You can take that down to 3.5, and you can go grab Max Crosby over half a sack. Combine that two together, 2-to-1 odds. You can turn $20 into 40. What's fantastic about this is Chalkboard is giving away up to $100 in bonus bets with promo code RTM. So if you go in the description of this video, click on the link, use promo code RTM, you could double your deposit up to $100, so $100 in bonus bets, and you could take that bet with us on Thursday night. Max Crosby over a sack, Austin Eckler over 3.5 receptions. Use those bonus bets. Pay for some Christmas gifts. You know the drill, guys. All right? Come on, let's have a little fun. Thursday night football. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom with Aiden O'Connell and Easton Stick playing. So, diving in the rankings. So, if you are watching this video on YouTube, I'm going to pull up how I've broken out my specific rankings and what that entails. So, specifically what you're going to see here on the very left side is my rank, where I've ranked specific players. Then where you go over to the right, you're going to see how I compare versus expert consensus rankings. So that's the consensus rankings that Fantasy Pros has with like 60 plus fantasy experts. Then you're going to see the opposing defense that a respective player is going to play. You're going to see where they rank against wide receivers, how many points per game they give up to wide receivers. And then you're going to see expected fantasy points per game rank and fantasy points per game rank over the last month. So I like to look at the last month of data. I feel like that is the most directional and accurate data captured. Like the season's long, players are hurt, they come back into the lineup, they leave the lineup. I like the last 4 weeks of data. It's a limited sample size game we play. It's a limited sample size, I know, but that's just how I like to go off my rankings. I think that's what makes them unique. And then I've thrown all that together in a cumulative regression score. This is the Regression to the Mean podcast. We're always looking to ride regression, right? So you're going to hear me reference that a lot. So first tier wide receivers I have, clear 3 in my opinion this week. I've got A.J. Brown at 1, CeeDee Lamb at 2, Tyreek Hill at 3. So A.J. Brown, this is a plus matchup and a must-win game for the Eagles. The Seahawks have surrendered the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. A.J. Brown is a positive regression candidate. He has not scored a touchdown, I think, in a couple weeks. I think he is primed for a big week against Seattle. It's a must-win game for the Eagles now. They have to keep pace with the Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb here, Wide receiver 2 usage, wide receiver 5 production. This matchup isn't amazing against the Bills secondary, but his elite usage and production makes him an easy top 2 play this week, especially with Keenan Allen out. Wide receiver 3, that is Tyreek Hill. He is banged up. He's going up against a opposing defense that has given up the least amount of fantasy points per game to wide receivers. He has the 13th most valuable role in fantasy with the second most production over the past month. He's banged up, bad matchup. Last time he played them, he went for 25 fantasy points. I'm a little worried about weather in this game. This might be a tough game for Tyreek, but you can't drop Cheetah from your top tier. Next tier guys that I have here, I have Michael Pittman, Puka Nacua, DK Metcalf, and Stefon Diggs. This is my tier where I'm kind of putting a little extra skin in the game. I'm putting my neck out there. Puka Nacua, I've got him 6 spots ahead of expert consensus rankings. DK Metcalf, 4 spots. Michael Pittman, 1 spot. Stefon Diggs, 1 spot. So Michael Pittman here, elite usage and production in a good matchup against a beatable Pitt secondary. This game is being played indoors. Love Michael Pittman this week. He is a PPR machine. Puka here is a positive regression candidate. Wide receiver 8 usage, wide receiver 18 production over the past month. This game is played indoors against probably the worst secondary in the entire NFL. Giddy up for Puka Nacua. The Commanders give up 36 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Wide receiver 6, DK Metcalf. This is an up and pace matchup against a Philadelphia secondary that has surrendered 39 fantasy points per game, which is worst in the NFL. DK right now is the wide receiver 7 in production, and he is the wide receiver 16 in usage. So he's a negative regression candidate, but DK Metcalf's supposed to be dunking on regression. He is a very hyper-efficient player. I've loved what I've seen out of DK lately. He's running hot on touchdowns. This is such a good matchup. This Eagles secondary is so slow. And Diggs is a major positive regression candidate. This is a must-win game for the Bills. I like him even in a tough matchup. I wish he was lining up against his brother. We were robbed of the Diggs versus Diggs matchup here because Trayvon tore his ACL, which is a bummer. But nonetheless, I think Diggs bounces back this week. Next tier of guys that I have here, wide receiver 8 through 15. I've got Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Mike Evans, DJ Moore, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp, and Justin Jefferson. A lot of fallers in this tier. I've got Deebo and Brandon Aiyuk lumped together. I'm a huge 49er fan, by the way. # no bias. Deebo is the wide receiver 1 over the past month in production. Brandon Aiyuk, the wide receiver 11. Both of them are major negative regression candidates, but these guys continue to dunk on regression. They have a very juicy matchup this week against Arizona. I feel very good about both of them in the fantasy playoffs. Wide receiver 10, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I've got him 6 spots down against expert consensus rankings. Denver's been great against wide receivers this year. Amon-Ra St. Brown's role over the past month is the 14th best. You'd think that'd be a little higher for ARSB. And he's had the 24th production over the past month. So he's a positive regression candidate, but the usage hasn't been that great. This offense is sputtering a little bit. So maybe this is an ultimate get right game for ARSB, but ranking him top 4 right now feels a little optimistic. Maybe 10th is a little harsh, but I'm not putting ahead of any of the San Francisco guys right now, just how he's been running out. Mike Evans, 4 spots down ahead of expert consensus rankings. Not much to say on Mike, having a hell of a season. Green Bay isn't the best matchup. They're more of a run funnel defense. They give up more points to running backs. DJ Moore, 2 spots ahead of expert consensus rankings. He's been a top 5 fantasy wide receiver when Justin Fields is playing quarterback. He's almost matchup proof. I was seeing something from Scott Barrett too. DJ Moore does most of his damage against cover 1 and cover 2 shells. The Browns run cover 1 and cover 2 at a massive rate. This feels like a very big DJ Moore game. I feel really good about Jamar Chase. The production and the usage has been more of like an RB2, to be honest, over the past month. Minnesota's beatable. You can throw on him. It's a lot harder to run on him. I feel like Jamar will have a big week. Cooper Kupp, amazing matchup. Puka's the alpha, though, in this offense. He showed signs of life in week 14. This is, again, indoors cake matchup. Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 15. He says he's playing. So this is a good matchup against the Cincinnati secondary that's not that great. So I feel pretty good about Justin Jefferson this week. Let's get a full game out of him. Moving on to the next tier here, wide receivers 16 through 25. Chris Olave, DeVonta Smith, Courtland Sutton, DeAndre Hopkins, Garrett Wilson, Zay Flowers, Calvin Ridley, Jayden Reed, Jaylen Waddle, Rashee. I don't think I'll ever get it. I don't think I'll ever get it right. Rashee Rice, wide receiver 25. Okay, so can Chris Olave get in the end zone? This is a pretty friendly matchup to wide receivers this year, even though Deonte Banks, who's the corner on the Giants, is a stud. I'm very impressed with Deonte Banks this season, but they've given up 32.2 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. This is a cake matchup for Chris Olave. 42nd best usage, 17th best production. So he's a negative regression candidate that's running a bit hot. Let's see him get in the end zone here. That'd be a great spot. DeVonta Smith, he's had great usage and efficiency, RB11 usage, RB8 production over the past month. This is a great matchup against Seattle. Only fear is that Goddard eats into his production. Courtland Sutton, you know the game at this point. This guy catches a big touchdown pretty much every single week. This is a great matchup for him against the Detroit secondary that's not very good. DeAndre Hopkins, 10th in usage, 15th in production over the past month. Shout out. No one wanted him. Everyone said he was cooked. This guy's going crazy. Good for DeAndre Hopkins. Wide receiver 20, Garrett Wilson, 5th in usage, 31st in production. Is the Zach Wilson game an aberration? Is the weather going to be bad? I don't know. I'm not going to get too negative on Garrett Wilson after a big week. This matchup is pretty solid against Miami. They're very banged up right now. I feel like he could beat them, but the weather has me a little concerned. Zay Flowers, wide receiver 21. I've got him 4 spots ahead of expert consensus rankings. He has a 30% target share in games where Mark Andrews does not play, and he averages 20 fantasy points per game in those games. He hit the octopus last week, guys. If you don't know what an octopus is, he scored 6, then he got the 2-point. Anyone that's ripping an octopus, we're getting pretty excited about him. They're in the fantasy. They're in our fantasy lineups. This is a great matchup, by the way, against the Jaguars secondary that has given up 31 fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season. Calvin Ridley, 5 spots ahead of expert consensus rankings. I had to double check at this. He has the wide receiver 4 usage over the past month, and he has the wide receiver 13 production. I've never seen someone who's been pretty solid get shit on as much as Calvin Ridley has this year. It's been a bit up and down. The guy didn't play football for like 2 years, and he's playing just exclusively big boy downfield routes. This is a bit of a tough matchup for Ridley. The Baltimore Ravens are giving up the 26th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. I just think that someone's got to catch passes. This is Sunday night. I feel like Calvin Ridley's going to have a nice game. Jayden Reed at 23, I love him. If Watson doesn't play, wheels up. This Tampa Bay secondary sucks. We just saw Desmond Ridder tear him apart. Jaylen Waddle, not a ton of notes. He's been relatively consistent. It's kind of like a fringe wide receiver 2 over the past month. You know, if Tyreek doesn't play, you're going to bump him all the way up in your rankings. He went off against this Jets secondary on Black Friday. Basically, the only game in which the Jets secondary got beat was against Miami. So something to keep in mind here. But that was kind of the low point of the Jets season. That was like peak Tim Boyle. I cannot believe we lived through fucking peak Tim Boyle. My goodness. Rashee Rice, first time clearing 80% of the routes in a game this year in week 14. Thank you. Rational coaching wins. Play your best players, Andy Reid. Jeez Louise. I'm probably losing you guys with me saying that. New England has been stout against the run. You can beat them through the air, though. They've given up the 11th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Rice has got great usage and great production. Dude's been the wide receiver 16 over the past month. I probably should have him higher here. I probably could flip him for like Garrett Wilson, honestly. Next tier of guys that I have here, wide receivers 27 through 33, Jakobi Meyers, Drake London, Odell Beckham, Amari Cooper, T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin, and Romeo Doubs. If Tay misses this week against the Chargers, who have given up 32 fantasy points per game to wide receivers, Jakobi Meyers is a must start. If Jimmy Garoppolo were to play in this game over Aiden O'Connell, which seems like there's a strong possibility to concur, Jakobi Meyers is a must start. Jimmy was feeding Myers. Drake London, hell of a wide receiver. My goodness, he's in a bad situation. But we're riding with him. 22 in production, 25th in usage. So he's been exceeding given his circumstances. Odell Beckham quietly having a great year. This is a great matchup. I've got him 5 spots ahead of expert consensus rankings. Jacksonville, again, 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers this year. 22nd in expected fantasy points per game, so in usage, and 26th in production. OBJ is going crazy. Amari Cooper, wide receiver 30. Chicago's been a really good defense as of late. He's a major positive regression candidate. He showed some signs of life with Joe Flacco last week. 7 for 70, I think. I have to feel good about Amari Cooper. T. Higgins, I've got him up 7 spots. Not a big T guy per se, but he looked great last week. Jake Browning will get him the rock, so that's a big deal. Terry McLaurin, is he going to run cardio again? I don't know. And then Romeo Doubs. Again, if Watson doesn't play this week, wheels are up for Doubs. Wheels are up for Jayden Reed. I love them in this spot against the Tampa Bay secondary. That's just bad. Next tier guys here, I've got Diontae Johnson, Davante Adams, Elijah Moore, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Tyler Lockett, Brandin Cooks, and Josh Palmer. DJ, I don't know. This offense is so sad. He I think scored 15 fantasy points against the Patriots, caught a touchdown. Mitch Trubisky looked terrible, but somehow had more fantasy points in a game than Kenny Pickett's had in his whole career. So I don't know. I don't really know what to do with that. Davante Adams, is he going to play or not? If he plays, you're going to bump him way up in the rankings. Elijah Moore, 15th in usage, 42nd in production. Either he's bad or regression's coming his way. Probably a little bit of both. Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Tyler Lockett. So this is a great matchup against the Eagles secondary, which is bad. Expected fantasy points per game over the past month. JSN 28th, Tyler Lockett 44. Production over the past month. Jaxon Smith-Njigba 51st, Tyler Lockett 38th. Usage indicates that JSN should be scoring more points than Tyler Lockett. I just think it's a matter of time, folks. Brandin Cooks at 39. He's coming back down to earth a bit after running super hot there for the past month. And then Josh Palmer. I feel like I might have to move Josh Palmer up more. I just don't know if Easton Stick is any good. If you are on Chalkboard, Josh Palmer, you can drop some of his receiving props down. The Raiders' offensive props aren't up yet. Maybe once they have some clarity on who's playing quarterback and if Davante Adams are going to play, they'll post them. I would get all over some Josh Palmer lines. I feel pretty confident about him and Eckler this week. Last tier guys that I have, Adam Thielen, Noah, wide receivers 41 to 50. Thielen, Noah Brown, Gabe Dave, Zay Jones, Josh Downs, Curtis Samuel, Marquise Brown, Chris Godwin, Jordan Addison, and Jonathan Mingo. Adam Thielen is just trending downward. This offense is just terrible. It's really bad to watch. Noah Brown has back-to-back goose eggs. Wide receiver 58 in usage. Wide receiver 164. He's the highest positive regression candidate I have seen this season. Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't play him. Gabe Davis has 3 goose eggs in the past 5 weeks. Naturally means he's going to score 30 this week. Zay Jones, wide receiver 21 usage, wide receiver 62 production. Major positive regression candidate. Just kind of a tough matchup against Baltimore. Josh Downs, I'm sorry, it might be Joe over. Michael Pittman is just alpha this offense. Marquise Brown is a positive regression candidate, but how healthy is he? Charvarius Moore might not play. He could be someone I look really foolish about. He could rise up the ranks pretty steadily, but I'm down on him. I'm down on Chris Godwin, 12 spots. He got force-fed targets in week 13 and 15 and still has produced little with it. His wife complained about his usage on Twitter. I would too. Chris Godwin's a hell of a player. But again, wide receiver 30 usage over the past month, 46th production. Just really doesn't seem like he has great rapport with Baker Mayfield at this point. Rounding out the list, Jordan Addison, major positive regression candidate, wide receiver 34 usage, wide receiver 60 production. Maybe Nick Mullins is the grown-up in the room that can hit wide receivers. Josh Dobbs couldn't do that for the Cardinals. He could only hit tight ends. Similar here with TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota. Maybe Nick Mullins unlocks Addison again. And then Jonathan Mingo. Great usage over the past month, but his quarterback's Bryce Young. So it's difficult. Man, I don't think I've been as wrong about something as Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I was team Bryce. Rough go for me. Milk was most certainly a bad choice with that take. That is going to do it for our wide receiver rankings. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you want to access these rankings completely for free, they are in the description of this video below. If you have not yet, subscribe to the Regression to the Mean channel. You know what to do, people. We're coming at you 3 to 4 times a week, making some of the best content in the fantasy space, in my humble opinion. No bias. We miss you, Aiden. We miss you, Keegan. Until next time.